gotten more power from the beginning of the book.
And what do you mean by power?
They have like more control over the other animals.
He has control, they have control over the other animals. Does everybody agree, Liam?
Well, they also they stopped thinking of Old Major as like the founder, more like Napoleon.
Oh, so he kind of went to the wayside. Lisa?
In chapter 7, it talks about how the hens got thrown out, and if anyone offended anything, they would be killed. But one of the commandments was that no animal shall be killed, so they kind of changed that one too.
That's ironic, isn't it? So here's a perfect example of irony of how they said, thou shalt not kill another animal, but yet they killed the chickens. And they needed the chickens to survive. I thought they were kind of an important part of the whole society there. They were providing them with food and they were providing them with money. Yes, Shane?
I was gonna say something about the other thing about, I think the pigs are getting meaner as the story goes on.
The pigs are mean?
Yeah, they're getting meaner as the story goes on.
In what way were they mean?
Well, like in the beginning they were kind of nice, and then they started eating like the apples, and then they're forcing the animals to do all this work now.
Yeah, they were becoming like a monarch. Yes.
I kind of agree with Shane because, like, I think Napoleon, like, the pigs, and, like, I think they knew, like, what was going to happen. Like, they had kind of planned. So then they just, like, they made sure that nobody found out, and now they're kind of, like, building up to, like, I guess, taking over, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, and I think it was pre-planned. It's almost like when you talk about the Russian Revolution, the more you look into it, I begin to wonder, did they already know that, yeah, everyone would be equal except for them?
And I think that Napoleon and Squealer were manipulating the other animals and thinking that what they were doing was right.
Squealer seemed to play that role. Anyone want to comment on Squealer? I mean, think about his name, Squealer. It almost sounds like he's doing something. Yes.
Sounds like he's, like, making, like, I think him and Napoleon are, like, working together to, like, make the animals think what they really, like, they don't do.
And that's like a brainwashing type of thing. Yes.
Squealer's basically the right-hand man.
He's the right-hand man. You ever hear about that? Now, Squealer, when I think of Squealer, I think of, rat thinker, somebody that's a stoolie or tells on everybody. But he's kind of like sneaky in the story. And he comes forward and he makes everything sound like, well, that's really not what you heard. It says clearly that they can do this. You're wrong. It wasn't that way. And what really was ironic to me was they were singing this song, Beasts of England, and it was a rallying song, and all of a sudden, something happens to the song.
Napoleon made a song for himself, and they banned the song.
So what was wrong with Beasts of England? Brenna?
Well, I was going to say something about Squealer.
Go ahead.
I think that Napoleon is going to, like, all of a sudden turn on Squealer. Like, how they like working together.
Right.
I think he's eventually going to
Do away with Squealer, and then he technically just uses people. Yeah.
The Beast of England song was promoting rebellion.
Uh-huh.
Napoleon.
Please pick up your heads. This is a discussion, it's not a sleep time. Thank you. It's excuse me, I need to hear that again.
It promotes rebellion instead of like praising Napoleon.
So they were rebelling. They came together as a rally. And if you remember learning about America starting, they came together and they formed a constitution and they had amendments and they had these freedoms and rights. And here, in this particular society, they did rally together under their song. And they thought they had it so bad with Mr. Jones, they wrote these 7 commandments, and now all of a sudden, they're changing. Ben, what do you think? What do you feel about the changing of the commandments?
I think it's like kind of going back on what they first started out talking of, and they just keep changing it to fit the kids' needs, and they're not really taking anybody else into consideration.
Is that happening in the real life today? I In what way is that happening? I see you shaking your head, yes. How is it changing today? Can you think of a governmental thing that's happening today?
Well, like today, like laws are being changed, like certain unions, and people are like seeking through the cracks on laws and not getting caught. And it's kind of like how the pigs are. They're changing the laws to fit their own needs, and they're getting away with it because no one notices that.
It makes me wonder about my government. I don't know about you, when I was thinking about this, how they change, we can amend our different things in our Constitution. What about the gun laws? It was started out in the beginning of our country that was to defend ourselves. We didn't have a military. So now we have a military and we still have the same law and people are wanting more guns. So are we going because somebody believes in a particular thing like the NRA, or are we really thinking about the whole group of the people? Now, they seem to call each other comrades. Does anybody know what comrade means? Yes, friend. Friend. So why do they address each other as comrade except for one person? Who, Napoleon, what do they suggest he is? Leader Napoleon. Why isn't he comrade? Because wasn't the seventh commandment what? All animals are equal. Can you be equal if you have a title?
No.
Not really. Kelsey, what do you think about that?
I don't think it's very fair.
In what way isn't it fair?
Because the commandment is that they're all equal and everyone should be all equal and just something
They just keep taking control. But what does a title give somebody?
more power.
How, in what way?
That makes them feel like he's the leader.
He makes him
Better
feel
than all of them.
he's better than it. So it's not even just an intrinsic thing that you can touch or feel, but if you get a title, like I said today, I watched your reaction as we said, well, we were going to give a certain student the name King. Well, he doesn't deserve the title King. And that caused a reaction. You know, King, why not? Yes.
Well, like, so they were calling him, like, leader comrade, but then in chapter 8, when he's, like, dying, they start calling him comrade Napoleon.
Comrade
so I think
Napoleon.
they are trying to make him, like, feel sorry for him because he's our friend.
He's our friend. That's a very good point. I like how she went back to the text and talked about that. Because here in the beginning, all of a sudden he wanted to rise to power, and now Napoleon is back to comrade Napoleon. Do you think that he is their true friend?
No.
John, what were your thoughts? What is there an outstanding thing that happened in the book that made you either think twice about it or made you concerned for the animals?
He executed a bunch of them for suspicion that they were working for Boeing.
He executed a bunch of them, just under a suspicion. And do you think that he should have had that power?
No.
Why not? He was leader.
Well, you shouldn't execute people just for suspicion. You have to
Just-
have proof.
You have to have proof. So do we have proof in our society? You have what kind of
Witness.
evidence? You have to have evidence. Don't we have an amendment that protects our rights? You have the right to a
Lloyd.
speedy trial. Yes, and we have the right, we are innocent until proven guilty. So that's kind of like a big thing that happens. But in this utopic society, they're supposed to all be equal. And yet he just said, there was one thing that he accused. Who did he accuse for all of the atrocities in the snowball? Anyone want to talk about that part of it? Did that bother you? Yes, Noah.
Every time there was a rumor going around that Snowball would come back at night and take their food and everything, and Napoleon would go around with his dogs and say, Snowball is here.
Snowball was here. Was it really Snowball?
Probably not.
I think, like, when the food ended up being missing and all that, I think it's just the pigs taking it in the middle of the night and going to get the Snowball so that people don't get suspicious.
Yes,
Maybe they're like sleepwalking and you walk.
they're sleepwalking and you don't know. Yes, Ben?
And they, forgot what it was.
Olivia?
Well, like maybe Napoleon blames everything on Snowball just to make himself seem better than Snowball, because I really don't think Snowball would come back so far and get revenge, because I don't think he's that kind of a kid.
He was run off, and I think in the beginning, I really believe he was a true leader because he was honest and loyal. Yes.
And it says that, some of the animals were dying from famine, but it didn't say that the pigs were hungry or anything like that. So they're probably stowing away food.
Isn't that interesting? That's a very interesting point, that the animals are dying of famine, which is they're hungry, but yet you don't hear anything about the pigs. Yes, Noah?
I think the pigs are putting it in the house and then blaming it on Snowball.
I'm blaming it on Snowball. I see. That's called a scapegoat. And in society, have you ever seen this happen? Even in school, there's a scapegoat. There's always a kid in the class that, oh, he did it, or she did it, and she did it. And they constantly blame one person for doing something. You know, have you ever felt that way as a person? You know, remember when you make connections, as you're reading, it's very good to make connections. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that when you're writing on your back of your point here, where it says an idea that we haven't come across, maybe there's a time when you're going to make a connection about what you were reading and when something that reminded you of something that happened to you or someone that you know, and it's exactly like it. It's not uncommon for an author to write something about real life and disguise it under what he's writing about. In Animal Farm, he was writing subversively about the communistic government. He didn't come out and say that this is about the communists, but yet everyone was able to read it and come to that point. Last night after reading, I thought of some questions, and what happened to the rebuilt windmill? They went through all this trouble after it was destroyed. Yes?
They're saying that it just fell down because it wasn't thick enough, so now they're rebuilding it for it to be 3 feet thick.
But the first time they felt it was built kind of shabbily, I guess, and it wasn't thick enough, the walls. And actually it was just a storm. It wasn't Snowball, was it?
Yeah.
It was the weather. Because, I mean, trees fell down and everything else, so that was kind of a distinguishing thing. But are they rebuilding it again?
Yes.
Why are they doing that, John? Do they think it's important?
Well, no. I think they just want to, like, make the animals just work so they don't have time to think about what's going on.
That's a very good point. If they're always working, they don't have a point to think. They have no moments. They're constantly working, and so therefore they have no time to socialize and spread around their rumors. Yes?
And maybe like, since they always keep blaming it on Snowball, like they don't want to give Snowball the credit of like thinking that he like made them.
Well, that was Snowball's first idea. And who took the idea of the windmill away? Napoleon. Yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing. How did those hens rebel against the contract with Whimper? Noah?
They heard him say that they would have to give their eggs, but they didn't really think they were going to have to do it.
Yeah, at first they thought, that's crazy. Why did they think it was crazy? Yeah.
Well, they didn't really think it was gonna happen, so they were gonna go lay their eggs down by like the spring river
Mhm.
thing, so they couldn't like take their eggs. But then they started to starve the hens because they kind of like rebelled, and that's when they were talking about executing whoever gave them food.
Correct, yes.
If the hens stop laying eggs, aren't all of the hens eventually just
Die. If they don't have any chicks, what's going to happen to the hen population? Good point, Brenna.
stop?
They'll just stop having eggs altogether, because if you don't reproduce and have more of them, that could be a problem. What went wrong with the sale of the timber? Remember, they started bargaining, and wasn't one of the commandments said that they won't do that. But I thought that was kind of ironic also. But they sold off all this timber to the side, and they made a deal on the side, and what happened to them? Jessica, do you know who, they went to Mr. Winthrop, what did he do in payment to them? I kind of related it to the Civil War money. After the Civil War, if you went in and you used only the Confederate money, was it any good? No, it wasn't any good. So what happened here? What did they give them in return? Fake banknotes. So the banknotes, they weren't worth anything, were they?
No.
So were they tricked? So were the animals really and truly smart enough to make their own society?
No.
I kind of think about that. Now, what I would like you to do now is make a reflection on what we talked about. A, pick one that you agree or disagree. 3 to 4 points of what you learned. And on the back, something that we didn't cover, that in our next session when we meet on Monday, what you want to bring up about the book. And when we're done with this, we'll review to chapter 9 to get to the end of it. Our Bloom's Bowl will be our end of our session. Is there any questions when we begin? No? Okay, thank you. All right, go ahead.